The council chamber was enormous, stretching upward into artificial light that mimicked 1,000 different home suns. Representatives from 47 species sat in their designated sections, each area modified for their specific environmental needs. The luminar crystalline beings refracted light in the upper galleries. The aquatic depths dwelled in their pressurized tanks. The massive titans occupied reinforced platforms that could support their weight. In the human section, Ambassador Jiwan sat alone. There had been 5 human representatives once, but budget cuts had reduced their delegation over the years. No other species had their numbers reduced. Only humans. G1 listened as High Arbiter Velmuth announced the day's agenda. His crystalline voice echoed through translation devices embedded in every seat. The first item was a trade dispute between 2 mining corporations, resolved in 4 minutes with minimal discussion. The second was a request from the depths for expansion into a new water world, approved unanimously without debate. Then came the human items. Request from Earth's Colonial Administration for settlement rights on Kepler 442 system, Velmuth announced in a bored tone. The system is unclaimed and uninhabited. Jiwan stood to present her case, but before she could speak, Councillor Dravik made a gesture of dismissal. Denied. Humans have sufficient territory. We have 12 worlds for 8 billion people, Jiwan said calmly. The Sorok have 30 worlds for 2 billion. The Sorok have different needs, Velmuth replied. Next item. No vote. No discussion. Just denied. G1 sat down and looked at her datapad. Her expression didn't change, but her fingers moved quickly across the screen. She accessed a secure channel and read the message waiting there. It was from Admiral Dayun. 3 words, it's time now. The next agenda item made her stomach tighten. Deployment of peacekeeping forces to the Outer Rim conflict between Sorok and Depths territories, Velmuth announced. We require military assets to maintain the border. This was the 5th time in 2 years. Every time there was a conflict anywhere in Council space, they called for human soldiers. Not Luminar. Not Titan, not any of the species actually involved in the disputes. Always humans. Earth will provide the necessary forces, Velmuth said. It wasn't a question. Jiwan stood again. How many human soldiers have died in Council peacekeeping operations in the past decade? The chamber went silent. Velmuth's crystalline structure flickered with what might have been annoyance. That information is not relevant to current deployment needs. 41,000, Jiwan said quietly. 41,000 human soldiers dead in conflicts that had nothing to do with Earth. How many Luminar died? Ambassador Jiwan, you are out of order? 3, Jiwan continued. How many Sorok? 16. How many Titans? None. 0. They're too valuable, apparently. But human lives are cheap enough to spend freely. This is not the time for... When is the time? Jiwan asked. We've requested this discussion 67 times over 9 years. Every request denied or ignored. Velmuth's structure brightened with anger. The Council has spoken on military deployment. Earth will comply. Jiwan looked around the chamber. She saw the same expression on every alien face, impatience, irritation that she was wasting their time. Not one looked sympathetic. Not one questioned whether sending humans to die in other species, wars, was right or wrong. She thought about the message from Dayun. She thought about the emergency meetings that had happened in secret across human space for the past 3 months. She thought about the vote that had taken place among Earth's governments, colonies, stations, and ships. It had been unanimous. Humanity was done. Jiwan gathered her materials slowly. She placed each data tablet carefully in her case. She closed it with a soft click that seemed loud in the silent chamber. Ambassador Jiwan, Velmuth said sharply, we have not adjourned this session. She looked up at him. For just a moment, she let him see everything she felt. The exhaustion, the frustration, the grief for all the human lives spent for species that didn't even bother to learn their names. Then her expression went neutral again. I know, she said simply. She walked toward the chamber doors. Behind her, she heard confused murmuring. Velmuth called her name again, his voice rising. She didn't stop. She didn't look back. The doors opened at her approach and closed behind her with a soft hiss. In the corridor outside, 2 human security officers fell into step beside her. They didn't ask questions. They already knew across Station Harmony other humans were moving. In the medical wing, Dr. Sumin logged out of the trauma center systems and wiped her personal research from the databases. In the engineering section, Hyunsu downloaded his diagnostic tools and shut down the maintenance protocols only he understood. In the commercial district, human shop owners closed their businesses and posted simple signs, relocated. In orbit around the station, human ships began departure procedures, freighters, colony transports, medical vessels, research ships, and most significantly, the military fleet that had been stationed there for council security. Admiral Daeyeon stood on the bridge of the carrier Incheon and watched the synchronized departure on his displays. 300 vessels all moving at once. No fanfare, no announcements. Just a quiet, orderly withdrawal. "Admiral, we're receiving hails from station control," his communications officer reported. "They're asking for explanation of fleet movements." "Don't respond," Daeyeon said. "Set course for the Sol system, yes, sir." Similar scenes played out across council space. On 40 planets, human colonists who had built farms and cities on alien worlds began packing. On 16 space stations, human engineers and technicians shut down their workstations and headed to the docks. On 7 joint research facilities, human scientists collected their notes and samples and left behind equipment that would soon stop working without them. In every case, the departure was orderly and calm. No sabotage. No destruction. No angry speeches. Humans simply stopped working for the council and left. The alien species barely noticed at first. A few administrators filed reports about human personnel failing to report for duty. Station managers complained about shops closing unexpectedly. But it seemed like a minor inconvenience. Nothing more. In the council chamber. The session continued after Jawan's departure. They approved 7 more measures, assigned 2 research grants, and discussed an upcoming cultural festival. High Arbiter Velmuth made a note to file a formal complaint about the human ambassador's disrespectful behavior. It would be weeks before they understood what had really happened. By then, every human in council space would be gone. 8 billion people, hundreds of stations, thousands of ships, all of them withdrawing into human territory and closing the borders behind them, and they did it without saying another word. 2 weeks passed before the council realized something was seriously wrong. Administrator Quilks managed Station Harmony's daily operations. He was a methodical being, a member of the insectoid species that prided itself on efficiency and order. His morning routine never changed. He reviewed overnight reports with his morning meal, prioritized issues, and delegated tasks to department heads. This morning, his datapad showed 73 critical alerts. Yesterday there had been 12. The day before, 8. He stared at the screen, his compound eyes trying to make sense of the pattern. Life support in Section 7 was failing. The quantum communication relay was experiencing blackouts. The water recycling system was operating at 60% efficiency. The medical wing had canceled all elective surgeries. The main computer core was throwing errors no one could diagnose. Quilks called an emergency meeting with all department heads. When they gathered in his office, he noticed immediately that 7 chairs sat empty. All 7 had been held by humans. "Where is Chief Engineer Hyunsu?" he demanded. The Sorok deputy engineer shifted uncomfortably. "He left 2 weeks ago. We assumed it was vacation time. Did he file for vacation?" "No, Administrator. He just left." "And the communication system started failing when?" 2 weeks ago." Quilks felt a cold sensation in his thorax. "Someone explained to me how our communication system, which has run perfectly for 30 years, suddenly breaks the moment our chief engineer leaves." The deputy engineer looked down. Hyunsu handled all the major repairs. He said the system was aging and needed constant adjustment. We thought he was exaggerating to make himself seem more important. Where is he now? We don't know. We've tried to contact him. No response. Quilks moved through his list. Dr. Sumin, head of trauma surgery, gone. The hospital was now unable to perform 17 different critical procedures. Youngji, cybersecurity chief, gone. The station's defense network was vulnerable for the first time in anyone's memory. Every empty chair represented a human, and every human's absence had created a cascade of failures. Get me a count, Quilks ordered. How many humans worked on this station? The answer came back an hour later. 347. All gone. All within a 3-day period 2 weeks ago. And no one had noticed because humans had always been quiet, reliable, and easy to ignore. Quilks sent an urgent report to the council. He marked it Priority 1. He received an automated response saying his message had been received and would be reviewed in order of importance. In Sector 9, Councillor Dravik was dealing with his own crisis. The agricultural world of Plenty was starving. Impossible, he thought. Plenty had fed 4 systems for 2 generations. Its name was Literal. He reviewed the reports from the planetary governor. Crop yields were down 70%. The special rotation techniques had stopped working. The genetically modified seeds were failing. The irrigation systems were malfunctioning. What changed? Dravik asked during the emergency call. The governor, a nervous depths in an environment suit, gestured helplessly. Our agricultural director left. Jihun, he was human. We thought the systems he set up would run automatically. And they don't? He adjusted them constantly. Different crops every season. Modified the soil treatment weekly. Changed irrigation patterns based on weather predictions we don't understand. We have all his notes, but they're incomplete. He kept the crucial details in his head. Why would he do that? We asked him that once. He said he'd tried to train others, but no one was interested in learning. They said human farming methods were too complicated and unnecessary. Dravik closed his eyes. How long until people start dying? Starvation begins in 6 weeks if we don't find a solution. The pattern repeated across council space. On the mining world of Deep Crust, production had dropped 80% because the human supervisor who coordinated the mining drones had left. On Station Unity, a plague outbreak was spreading unchecked because Dr. Sumin had been the only physician who knew how to treat it. On the border stations, Sorok and Depth ships were clashing more frequently because human peacekeepers were no longer there to mediate. Counselor Dravik began compiling data. He was thorough by nature, and what he found horrified him. In the past 50 years, humans had been involved in some capacity in 93% of all council operations. Not as leaders, rarely receiving credit, but as the workers who made everything function. They maintained the technology. They solved the problems no one else wanted to handle. They volunteered for the dangerous jobs. They worked the long hours. They filled the gaps that other species ignored. And the council had taken it all for granted. Dravik brought his findings to the council chamber. He stood before the assembly and presented his evidence calmly and clearly. We are experiencing critical failures across 17 sectors, he said. Every failure correlates directly with human departure. Our communication network is failing because humans maintained it. Our medical system is overwhelmed because humans staffed it. Our food supply is collapsing because humans managed it. High Arbiter Velmuth listened with visible impatience. Councillor Dravik, you are suggesting that the council cannot function without one species? That is absurd. We are 47 civilizations spanning thousands of worlds. I'm not suggesting it, Dravik replied. I'm showing you the data. Look at the numbers. Numbers can be manipulated to show any narrative. Then explain Station Harmony's life support failures. Explain the famine on Plenty. Explain the communication blackouts. Coincidence. Aging infrastructure. Poor management. Velmuth's crystalline structure brightened with irritation. What you're describing is impossible. Humans were support staff, assistants. They didn't run anything important. That's what we told ourselves, Dravik said quietly. But it wasn't true? We gave them all the jobs we didn't want to do, and over time those became all the jobs that actually mattered. The chamber erupted in arguments. Some counselors agreed with Dravik. Others insisted he was overreacting. The Sorok representative claimed humans were clearly trying to manipulate the council by staging a temporary walkout. The Titan representative suggested humans had always been too emotional and were probably throwing a tantrum. We should open negotiations, Dravik urged. Offer them what they've been requesting. Colony rights, fair representation, equal voice in decisions. Absolutely not, Velmuth declared. We are the Galactic Council. We do not negotiate with species that abandon their responsibilities. The humans will return when they realize they need us more than we need them. Until then, we hire other species to fill their positions and continue as normal. The vote was called. Dravik's proposal to reach out to humanity was rejected 43-4 that evening. Dravik sat in his quarters and looked at the casualty reports from the border conflicts. Human peacekeepers had been preventing these wars for decades. Now, without them, old hatreds were reigniting. The Sorokan depths had already fought 3 skirmishes. Civilian casualties were mounting. He tried to call Ambassador Jawan. The communication request was routed to Earth's diplomatic network. It connected, but no one answered. He tried again, and again. Each time, the connection was valid, the signal was strong, but no one on the other end responded. They weren't blocking his calls. They just weren't interested in talking. In human space, Jawan received the notification of Dravik's calls. She looked at the screen for a long moment. She had always respected Dravik. He had been one of the few counselors who treated humans with basic courtesy, but she didn't answer. This wasn't about individual relationships anymore. It was about humanity collectively deciding they deserved better than to be used, and discarded. She deleted the notifications and went back to work planning Earth's new colonial expansion into systems the Council had always denied them. 3 months after the humans left, the Void Collective attacked. General Mordek was in the middle of a staff meeting when the alerts came through. Red warnings filled every screen in the command center. Sensors detected massive fleet movements along the entire Outer Rim border. Ships were pouring through the barrier nebula that had always marked the edge of explored space. How many? Mortek demanded. He was a veteran Sorok commander, his scales scarred from a dozen conflicts. Our systems can't count them all, his tactical officer replied, her voice shaking. At least 4,000 capital ships. Maybe twice that. That's impossible. The Void Collective has never had that kind of force. They do now, sir. Mortek pulled up historical records. For 30 years, the Void Collective had been a constant threat at the borders. Raiders and pirates mostly, sometimes organized into small fleets. They would probe defenses, attack weak targets, and retreat before serious retaliation, but they had never retreated because of Council military strength. Mortek saw it clearly now in the records. Every time the Void Collective had pulled back, it was because human ships had arrived. Human fleets had patrolled the Outer Rim constantly, never seeking glory or recognition, just quietly maintaining the border. The Collective hadn't been weak. They'd been patient, waiting for the humans to leave. Send emergency requests to all Council fleets, Mordek ordered. We need every ship at the border now. Sir, most Council fleets are dealing with internal conflicts. The Sorok Depths border war has pulled ships from 7 sectors. The Luminar have refused to deploy their fleet outside their home systems due to the instability. Mortek's claws gouged marks in his command chair. What about the human fleets? Silence. Everyone in the command center knew the answer. The first border station fell in 4 hours. The second in 6? By the end of the first day, 12 stations had been destroyed or captured. The casualty count was already in the millions. Counselor Tevras watched the invasion reports with growing horror. He was an amphibious being, usually calm and contemplative. Now he felt panic rising in his chest. He had spent the past month investigating human contributions to the Council. What he found had shaken everything he thought he knew about galactic civilization. The quantum communication network that connected all Council worlds had been designed by a multi-species team 40 years ago, but the design had been theoretical and flawed. Hyunsu had spent 2 decades making constant adjustments to keep it functioning. His maintenance logs showed thousands of small fixes, each one preventing catastrophic failures. Without him, the network was dying. Entire sectors were now dark, unable to communicate. Military coordination was impossible. Trade had ground to a halt. Governments couldn't contact their own colonies. Tevras had found similar patterns everywhere he looked. The Council's prosperity hadn't been built on the brilliance of 47 species working together. It had been built on humans quietly fixing everyone else's mistakes. Dr. Sumin had performed a surgical technique that no other council physician could master. She'd tried to teach it for years, but her colleagues dismissed it as unnecessarily complex. Now, with plague spreading through 3 sectors, patients were dying because no one else could perform the surgery. Youngji had maintained cybersecurity systems that everyone assumed were automatic. They weren't. She had been actively fighting intrusion attempts every single day, manually adjusting defenses and predicting attacks before they happened. In the 3 months since she'd left, the Council had lost classified military data, financial records, and private communications of government officials. The pattern was everywhere. Humans hadn't just helped. They had been essential. But they'd been so quiet about it, so modest, that no one had noticed. TV single quotes Ras stood before the Council and presented his findings. Unlike Dravik's presentation months ago, this time no one argued. They were too busy dealing with crises. "We need to understand what happened," Tevras said. "Why didn't we see this coming?" High Arbiter Velmuth looked older somehow, his crystalline structure dimmer than before. "The humans always volunteered. For everything. We grew accustomed to it." "We didn't grow accustomed," Counselor Dravik said bitterly. "We grew entitled." "There's a difference." Tevras pulled up a historical record. 23 years ago, Ambassador Jiwan's predecessor requested increased human representation on the Council. Denied. 18 years ago, humans requested fair compensation for technological innovations they developed. Denied. 12 years ago, they requested that other species share equally in military deployments. Denied. He displayed more records. Hundreds of requests, proposals, and pleas spanning decades, all rejected or ignored. "They tried to tell us," Tevras said, "over and over. We didn't listen. We thought their contributions were simply their nature, not a choice they were making. We never considered they might stop choosing us." "We need to send a delegation to Earth," Dravik insisted. "Apologize? Offer them everything they asked for. Beg if we have to." "Pride forbids begging," one of the Luminar counselors objected. "Pride?" Dravik's voice rose. "Half our worlds are starving, our communication is dead, we're losing a war, and you're worried about pride?" The vote was called. This time, the proposal to contact humanity passed, barely, 25 to 22. The Council composed an official message. They apologized for past oversights. They offered humans 10 new colony worlds, full Council representation, equal status in all decisions, and financial compensation for unpaid contributions. They sent it through every communication channel they still had functioning. No response. They sent another message. And another. Personal pleas from individual counselors. Formal diplomatic requests. Urgent military appeals for help against the Void collective invasion. Nothing. Not a word. Administrator Quilks, still struggling to keep Station Harmony functional, tried a different approach. He had once worked closely with Hyunsu. They hadn't been friends exactly, but they'd respected each other. He composed a personal message. "Hyunsu, it's Quilks. I understand why you left. I'm not asking you to come back. I just need help understanding the communication system. People are dying because we can't coordinate emergency services. If you could just send me the technical specifications, I could train others to maintain it. Please." He sent the message. It was delivered successfully. He could see the confirmation. Someone on the other end had received it, but there was no reply. On Earth, Hyunsu read the message. He sat in his new apartment overlooking the ocean and stared at the words. Part of him wanted to help. Quilks had always been decent to him. But the decision wasn't his alone to make. Humanity had voted. Not just Earth's government, but every human colony, station, and ship. 8 billion people participating in the largest democratic decision in human history. The question had been simple. Should humanity remain part of the Galactic Council? 94% had voted no. The reasons were different for everyone. Some were angry about fallen soldiers. Some were tired of being taken for granted. Some simply wanted humanity to focus on its own development instead of constantly serving others. But the result was clear. Humanity was done. Yunsu deleted Quilks's message. It hurt to do it, but he did it anyway. Then he went back to work on Earth's new communication network, one that would connect only human worlds. In council space, the situation grew worse every day. The Void Collective conquered 6 more worlds. Internal conflicts erupted as species blamed each other for the crisis. Trade collapsed completely. Millions became refugees. And through it all, the humans remained silent. They'd built walls around their territory. Automated defense stations guarded the borders. Any ship that approached was turned away without communication. Not with threats. Not with warnings. Just a simple redirect. The message was clear without words. Humanity had moved on. The rest of the galaxy would have to solve its own problems now, 6 months after the humans left. High Arbiter Velmuth did something no council leader had done in 300 years. He left council space and traveled to human territory. His ship approached the border slowly, broadcasting peaceful intentions on every frequency. Human defense stations tracked his approach but didn't respond. He continued forward until a human patrol ship intercepted him. Admiral Daeyun appeared on the screen. He looked exactly as he had 6 months ago, calm and professional. Behind him, the bridge crew worked quietly at their stations. Velmuth had prepared a speech. He'd written and rewritten it dozens of times. Now, faced with Daeyun's steady gaze, the words felt hollow. Admiral, I come seeking dialogue. The council wishes to negotiate terms for— No, Daeyun said simply. You haven't heard our offer. We don't need to hear it. The answer is no. Velmuth's crystalline structure flickered. You don't understand the situation. The Void Collective has conquered 23 worlds. Billions are dead or displaced. Our infrastructure is collapsing. We're facing extinction. I understand perfectly, Daeyun replied. You're experiencing the consequences of your choices. We made mistakes. We acknowledge that. We're offering everything humans requested. Colony rights, full representation, reparations. You're offering these things now because you're desperate. Where were these offers when we weren't desperate? When we asked politely? When we pleaded? When we showed you the casualty lists of our dead soldiers? Velmuth had no answer. You had centuries to value us, Daeyun continued. You chose otherwise. Now you want us to fix your problems again. The answer is no. People are dying. People were always dying. Human people. Dying in your wars. Dying in your minds. Dying to maintain your comfort. You didn't care then? That's not fair? Fair? For the first time, emotion crept into Daeyun's voice. You want to discuss fair? I sent 41,000 soldiers to die for the council. 41,000. They had names, families, dreams. They died believing it mattered, that the council was worth protecting. And you denied us even a memorial because it would be too expensive. The transmission ended. Daeyun's face disappeared from the screen. The human patrol ship escorted Velmuth back to the border without another word. Velmuth returned to council space in silence. His crew didn't speak. There was nothing to say. They'd been rejected. Not with anger or threats. Just a simple, final no. The rejection broke something in the council. For the first time, they truly understood that the humans weren't coming back. Councillor Tevras tried a different approach. He had discovered that humans still maintained communication with 3 species, small civilizations that the council had largely ignored. The pale folk who lived on ice worlds. The singers, who communicated through complex harmonics. The stone dwellers, who moved so slowly that most species found them frustrating to work with. These species had something in common. They'd always treated humans as equals. They'd shared their knowledge freely. They'd mourned when human soldiers died. And now they were thriving while the rest of the council collapsed. Tevras sent a message to the Stone Dwellers' representative. It took 3 days to get a response, which was actually fast for Stone Dwellers. You wish to know why humans still speak with us? The message read. Because we valued them before we needed them. The difference matters. The words stung, but they were true. Meanwhile, individual counselors were sending personal pleas. Some were genuine apologies. Some were desperate cries for help. Some were angry demands that humans honor their obligations. Borum received one such message on her personal device. She was a teacher who had worked at a council school on Station Unity. The message was from one of her former students, a young Luminar child named Krev. The video showed Krev in what looked like a refugee center. The child's crystalline structure was dull, a sign of stress and fear. Teacher Borum, please come back. I'm scared. The station is falling apart. My parents say we might have to leave our home. Everyone is fighting. Why did you go? Did we do something wrong? Borum watched the video 3 times. Each time, tears ran down her face. She wanted to respond. Wanted to tell Krev that it wasn't her fault, that the child had done nothing wrong, but she couldn't. The choice to leave hadn't been made by individual humans. It had been made collectively. Every human had their own personal connections to the council species. Friends, colleagues, students. Leaving hurt everyone, but staying would have hurt more. She saved the video but didn't respond. That evening she attended a community meeting where humans discussed the messages they were receiving. Hundreds of people shared their stories. Everyone had gotten pleas from someone they cared about. We can't ignore this, someone argued. These are people we know. People who need help? Murray stood up. She was a scientist who had worked at the council's main research facility for 15 years. I understand. I got messages too. From colleagues I respected. Some of them even stood up for us occasionally. But here's the question. If we go back now, what changes? The council is making offers because they're desperate. The moment the crisis ends, they'll go back to treating us exactly as they did before. You don't know that? Someone objected. Yes, I do. Because it's happened before. 30 years ago, there was a similar crisis. Humans saved the council then too. And what happened? 5 years later, they were denying our colony requests and sending our soldiers to die just like always. They apologized, promised change, and then nothing changed. The meeting continued for hours. In the end, the decision remained the same. Humanity would not return to the council, but they did send humanitarian aid to refugee camps. Food, medical supplies, temporary shelter, delivered by automated ships with no human crews. They would help people survive, but they wouldn't rejoin the system that had exploited them. In council space, the situation continued to deteriorate. The Void Collective's advance had slowed but not stopped. They now controlled a third of what had been council territory. The remaining council worlds were divided, suspicious of each other, unable to coordinate effectively. High Arbiter Velmuth called an emergency session. Only 30 counselors attended. 17 species had withdrawn from the council entirely, either conquered by the Void Collective or collapsed into isolation. We need to discuss the reality of our situation, Velmuth said. His voice was different now, quieter, less certain. The council as it existed is dead. We need to decide what comes next. Counselor Dravik stood. What comes next is we learn. We reform. We build something better. With what resources? We can barely maintain life support on our own stations. Then we start small. We work with what we have. And we make sure the next generation never forgets what happened here. Tevras supported the proposal. We need to document this. All of it. The human contributions we ignored. The warnings we dismissed. The consequences of our arrogance. It should be required teaching for every young being in council space. The remaining counselors agreed. It was too late to fix their mistakes. But maybe they could prevent future generations from repeating them. They established what they called the Remembrance, a historical archive and educational program. It would record every human contribution, every ignored request, every failure of the council to recognize what they had. But even as they worked on this, they knew it was inadequate. The best memorial would have been treating humans fairly when they were still there. In human space, life continued. Colonies expanded into systems the council had denied them. Trade flourished with the few species they still spoke with. Technology advanced rapidly without bureaucratic interference. Juwan stood on a new colony world and watched the sunset. It was beautiful, untouched. This world would have been denied to humans a year ago. Now it would be home to millions. She thought about Velmuth sometimes, about that moment when she'd walked out of the council chamber. Part of her wondered if there had been another way. Could they have changed things from within? But she knew the answer. They'd tried for decades. The council had taught humanity that their voices didn't matter. So humanity had stopped using voices and started using action. The silence was their answer. And it was final. 1 year. It had been 1 year since Ambassador Jiwan walked out of the council chamber. 1 year since humanity fell silent. The galaxy was unrecognizable. Now, Councillor Tevras stood in what remained of the council archives and looked at the before and after maps. Before the silence, the council had governed 412 worlds. Now, 17 worlds remained under council protection. 23 had been conquered by the Void Collective. The rest had either collapsed into chaos or withdrawn into isolation. 400 billion beings had lived under council governance. Now, fewer than 30 billion remained. The rest were dead, displaced, or had fled to whatever safety they could find. The Void Collective's advance had finally stopped, but not because the council had stopped them. The invaders had simply overextended their supply lines. Without human logistics expertise, they couldn't maintain their massive fleet so far from their home systems. The war had become a stalemate, with both sides too weak to push forward. Millions died every month in the grinding conflict. Millions more starved as agricultural systems continued to fail. The quantum communication network was now completely dead. Worlds were isolated, cut off from each other in ways that hadn't been true for 300 years. Tevras had spent the year documenting human contributions for the Remembrance Project. The work was devastating. Every file he opened revealed another way humans had been holding civilization together. He'd found maintenance logs showing Hyunsu had prevented 17 major communication network failures in his last year alone. Medical records showing Dr. Sumin had personally saved over 30,000 lives performing surgeries no one else could do. Military reports showing human peacekeepers had stopped 43 conflicts from escalating to full war. Page after page of invisible work. Millions of hours of effort that other species had dismissed as simple, unskilled labor. The worst part was reading the humans' own reports. They documented everything carefully, hoping someone would notice. Reports filed monthly, quarterly, annually. All ignored or dismissed as routine. We need acknowledgement of human sacrifices in border conflicts, one report from 8 years ago. Stated, denied. Request for memorial to fallen. Peacekeepers, another said. Denied due to budget concerns. The council had spent more on the High Arbiter ceremonial chambers than it would have cost to honor 41,000 dead soldiers. Tevras' hands shook as he closed another file. How had they been so blind? High Arbiter Velmuth sat alone in his private quarters. The title felt meaningless now. High Arbiter of what? 17 worlds and a dying dream? He thought about Jiwan constantly. That last look she'd given him before leaving. He'd seen something in her expression that he'd been too arrogant to understand at the time. It hadn't been anger. It had been sadness, disappointment, the look of someone who had tried everything, and finally accepted that nothing would change. She'd given up on them. They'd driven her to that moment of surrender through 1,000 small cruelties and dismissals. Velmuth had tried to send her personal messages, apologies, explanations, pleas. None were answered. The messages were delivered, he could see the confirmation, but she never responded. The silence was absolute. He'd learned that Ambassador G1 now served as Earth's colonial director. She was overseeing humanity's expansion into new systems. By all accounts, she was thriving. Humans were thriving. While the council collapsed, humanity flourished. That hurt more than any angry response could have. They didn't need the council. They'd never needed the council. The council had needed them, and now it was too late. In human space. Myrae stood on the observation deck of the orbital station Prime. Before her stretched the construction site of humanity's first Dyson sphere. Thousands of construction drones worked in perfect coordination, assembling the massive structure around a previously uninhabited star. The project would have been impossible a year ago. All of humanity's resources had been devoted to serving the council. Now, focused inward, they were accomplishing things they'd only dreamed about. Admiral Daeyun joined her at the viewport. Together they watched the construction in silence for a moment. "Do you ever wonder if we made the right choice?" Myrae asked. "Every day," Daeyun admitted. "Then I remember the names. Every human who died in council service. I memorized them all. 41,217 names. When I start to doubt, I recite those names. It helps me remember why we left. The council is dying." "I know. We could help." "Even now, we could, Daeyun agreed. "And if we did, nothing would change. They'd use us to fix their crisis, and then 10 years from now, we'd be right back where we started. Being taken for granted. Being used. Being dismissed." Myrae knew he was right. But it still felt strange, watching the galaxy burn while humanity built new wonders. "The Pale Folk sent a request," she said. "They need medical assistance. Plague outbreak. Send them help. They earned it by treating us as equals. What about the luminar colonies that are starving?" Daeyun was quiet for a long moment. "Send food?" "Through automated delivery. No human contact. We'll help them survive, but we won't help them rebuild what they destroyed." That had become humanity's policy. Humanitarian aid for those in desperate need, but no return to the old system. They would prevent deaths where they could. But they wouldn't fix the Council's fundamental problems. On the first anniversary of the Exodus, G1 made the only public statement humanity had issued in a year. It was brief and broadcast across all Council frequencies. "You asked why we left without a word? It's because words had failed for decades. Every protest was ignored. Every contribution was taken for granted. Every sacrifice was expected. You taught us that our voices didn't matter, so we stopped speaking." She paused. The transmission was audio only, but everyone listening could hear the weight in her voice. "You want to know what you lost? Look around. Everything that's breaking, everything that's failing, everything that's dying, we were holding that together while you told us we were beneath you. This is not a negotiation. This is not a plea for recognition. This is a farewell. We are not coming back. Not to fix your mistakes. Not to die in your wars. Not to be your servants while you pretend to be our equals. Build something new if you can. We hope you do. We hope you learn. But we will not be part of it. Humanity is done with the Galactic Council." The transmission ended. There would be no follow-up. No further communication. The statement was final. High Arbiter Velmuth listened to the message in his quarters. When it ended, his crystalline structure dimmed completely, the luminar equivalent of weeping. He'd destroyed the greatest alliance in galactic history through arrogance and blindness. Counselor Dravik listened from his office on one of the surviving council worlds. When the message ended, he immediately began drafting new reforms. If the council was going to survive at all, it needed to change fundamentally. They needed to learn from their mistakes even if the teachers were gone. Counselor Tevras listened from the archives. He added Jiwan's statement to the remembrance collection. Future generations would hear these words and understand the cost of taking others for granted. Administrator. Quilks listened on station Harmony, which was barely functioning on emergency life support. He finally understood why Hyunsu had left, why they'd all left. And he couldn't blame them. Across council space, billions listened. Some were angry. Some were desperate. But most simply felt the weight of remorse. They'd had something precious and destroyed it. Through casual cruelty and institutional arrogance, the galaxy split into 3 regions in the aftermath. The Void Collective controlled the Outer Rim. The Remnant Council struggled to survive in the core systems. And human space, closed and prosperous, occupied the sectors humans had claimed. The borders were clearly marked. Automated defense stations surrounded human territory. Any ship that approached was redirected firmly but without hostility. The message was clear. Humanity had moved on. Counselor Tevras managed to stabilize 17 worlds into a loose federation. It was a fraction of what had existed, but it was survival. He named the founding accord the Remembrance to ensure no one ever forgot. How they'd reached this point? The new Federation's first law mandated education about the human exodus. Every child would learn what the Council had lost and why. They would learn the names of the human soldiers who died protecting worlds that didn't value them. They would learn about the countless hours of invisible work that had held everything together. They would learn that the most devastating weapon wasn't military might or economic power. It was the simple act of walking away, of saying, "I'm done," and meaning it. High Arbiter Velmuth lived another 3 years. He spent them working on reparations and reforms that would never reach the people they were meant for. On his death, his last words were recorded. "We had everything, and we called it nothing." Humanity continued to build. Their Dyson sphere reached completion 5 years later. Their colonies spread across dozens of systems the Council had denied them. Their alliance with the Pale Folk, the Singers, and the Stone Dwellers grew into a genuine partnership based on mutual respect. They never forgot the Council years, but they didn't dwell on them. They'd made their choice and moved forward. Jawan lived to see humanity establish colonies in 30 new systems. She saw the completion of the Dyson sphere. She saw young humans grow up never knowing what it was like to be dismissed and undervalued on her final day. A reporter asked if she had any regrets about leaving the Council. She thought for a long moment before answering. "I regret that it took us so long to value ourselves." But leaving? No, that was the moment humanity finally chose itself. And we've been better for it ever since. The galaxy never forgot the silence that followed humanity's departure. It became a lesson passed down through generations, a reminder that no one is truly indispensable, but everyone deserves to be valued. And that sometimes the most powerful response to being taken for granted is simply walking away. Humanity had moved on, and the galaxy would never be the same.